Welcome to Factoring by Grouping. This is another way to factor a quadratic, and actually it's the way that I prefer to do it. It kind of shows you the process of what's going on when you're grouping as opposed to just going through the box method and filling in numbers. I kind of like to think of it as doing the FOIL method in reverse, and the steps of foiling show up basically, except obviously we're doing them in reverse. So let's look at the problem 2x squared minus 7x plus 6. The first two steps when we're grouping are very similar to the first steps whenever we're using the box method. We need to find two numbers that multiply to the same thing as the first and last term. When I say that, I mean I take 2x squared times 6, and I'm looking for a number, or two numbers that multiply to 12x squared, or 2x squared times 6. Those same two numbers have to add to give me my center term, negative 7x. Now here's an interesting point. It gives us sort of the logic and reasoning of how we have to have negative signs or positive signs. If the number that we're multiplying to is a positive number, then we have two options. Either both numbers are positive or both numbers are negative, because remember, when we multiply negative times a negative, we get a positive. Now we've got to be able to decide which of those two cases is going to be true in this situation. Well, if you look at the number that they have to add to, these two numbers have to add to a negative number. There's no way that two positive numbers can ever add to a negative number, so that means that both numbers have to be negative. Two negative numbers add to a negative and multiply to a positive, so we're good there. Now we just need to figure out what those numbers actually are. So the factors of 12x squared that multiply to give me negative 7x are going to be negative 3x and negative 4x. Here's the part that really kind of makes me appreciate this method over the box method. This negative 7x, we're going to take it and actually rewrite this quadratic, but we're going to break up the negative 7x into its two parts, namely the negative 3x and the negative 4x part. So we get 2x squared minus 3x minus 4x. See, minus 3x minus 4x, it's the same thing. All we did was break it up to make it easier to see what was going on there. Plus 6. Now what we're going to do is we're going to factor out a number. This is where we get the grouping part. Basically, 2x squared minus 3x minus 4x plus 6. And I'm going to make two groups here. Make sure if there's a negative here that you include that with this number. It only goes with the 4x, not with the 6. And I'm going to put a plus sign in the middle here. We always put a plus in the middle. Now I'm going to take out the greatest common factor from each of these binomials. So here I've got 2x squared minus 3x. Well, I can take an x out of each one. So that means x. And what's left once I take that x out? Well, I've got 2x. X squared divided by x gives me x. And then for here, I've taken out an x, so I'm left with just the negative 3. 2x minus 3. All right, on this side, my goal is always to make the part inside the parentheses for both the same. So I have to decide here, do I want to take out a positive 2 or a negative 2? If I took out a positive 2, I'd be left with negative 2x inside of the parentheses, like this. But that doesn't match my first binomial. That means that I need to take out a negative, which would make this a positive, and this in front of the 3 would be a negative. Doesn't seem to want to erase. There we go. So once I get the two parts inside the binomials the same, it's sort of a self-check. I know that I'm good. I've done it correctly. To write down my two factors, I take the part that's outside, so x minus 2 as my first factor. Then my second factor is the part that's already inside the parentheses, 2x minus 3. All right, so just like we did last time, let's go ahead and do a self-check to make sure that this is indeed the correct factorization of this quadratic. So to do that, what we need to do is FOIL these out. We've got x times 2x gives me 2x squared. Doing good so far. The outside terms, x times negative 3, negative 3x. Negative 2 times 2x, negative 4x. Negative 2 times negative 3 is positive 6. Now notice how this is just like the step we had up here where we split the negative 7x into its two parts. We're right back at that. So then we would expect that when we combine these together, we'll get back to our original equation. 2x squared minus 3x minus 4x gives me a minus 7x plus 6. So I'm back to my original equation. It does check out.